Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Star Wars review. This is going to be my review for Andor Episode 9. So, an interesting episode. I would say I absolutely loved the prison stuff and found the other plots to be a little slow-paced, as has been my kind of consistent kind of complaint with the show up to now. Not to say that the other stuff going on with, like I say, Deidre, Cyril, and so on, Mon Mothma, not to say that that stuff is bad, but definitely there is a lot of time devoted to scenes that don't really accomplish all that much. I'm not asking for, like, just them to insert a lot of action in here, but just to use the time in each episode just a little bit more effectively. And that's kind of a bit of the problem that I'm having here, is that we're 9 episodes in, and I'm not entirely sure what the, like, idea is for, say, like, the character of Cyril. I'm not entirely sure where exactly they're going with Mon Mothma, in that plot especially seems very slow-paced, and I'm just waiting for something to happen that changes things a little bit. The Deidre stuff, I think, is like, okay, it's interesting to just note that I suppose this is what the Empire is doing. This is their progress in terms of hunting down rebels, but it is a lot of scenes of characters just talking about stuff that we don't actually get to see. Which you don't need to show everything, but in this case, you know, there's a lot of scenes in that room where they're all having a discussion about what to do next. And look, it's interesting to a certain degree, but I think they're lingering on certain scenes like a little bit too long. And I think that was kind of my main issue with this episode, was that, especially in the early section of the episode, the whole interrogation of like Bix and stuff like that, I just think that scene went on way too long. Like, you were getting to the point where, like, oh, Bix is going to get, like, basically tortured, interrogated. And it's this, like, 7+ minute long scene of Deidre just talking and talking and Bix not really wanting to talk. And then, oh, we'll bring in this other guy to actually interrogate her. And it's like, why did that scene need to be anywhere near as long as it did? And look, I get it, the show has an approach of taking things a little bit slower, but it doesn't mean you need to do everything super, super slow. And it's just interesting to contrast, at least for me, how well everything is going in the prison, which is also a plot that is, in the grand scheme of Star Wars, taking things somewhat slow, but it's riveting, because I think it's because you have a sense consistently as you go through it what they're building towards, and I think it just feels like there's a structure to, in a way, well, the prison break arc of Andor is going here, but these longer arcs that aren't, like, specifically just grouped into, like, 3 or 4 episodes, is maybe where there's a little bit of a kind of struggle. Still some good individual scenes, of course, but just, I'm not sure, like, half of the series I'm kind of like, okay, keep going, and then we never quite get to what they're exactly trying to do, but then the prison stuff is just, like, delivering on all accounts. So, I suppose let's jump in with the Mon Mothma stuff. The main reveal here, ultimately, is that, oh, Vel, not related to Luthen, but actually related to Mon Mothma, her cousin. That was an interesting reveal in terms of, like, oh, this is the rich family that she's from. So that was nice to see, a little bit of a surprise there. Interesting kind of connection between the cast. But again, another scene where it's just, like, little bits and pieces of, like, okay, another scene with the daughter not having a great relationship with Mon Mothma. But her having a good relationship with her father, mainly because her father lets her do anything she wants. That's interesting. The first tease from the daughter of, like, oh, your old boyfriend, Tay, and it's like, oh, no. She tries to clears that up straight away, that, like, no, like, we knew each other, we were friends in, like, early school, basically, so they seem to drop it sort of after that point. In terms of, like, the discussion about rebel activity stuff. It was mainly just, I suppose, the idea that Vel is much more heavily in on the full scope of what the rebellion is doing, because she was, of course, involved in the action. Whereas Mon is still struggling, I think, with the idea that it's not just a network to sort of like fund certain like anti-empire like sentiment type thing, but the fact that it is becoming an actual organized like army effort against the empire, she is struggling with that. And the whole point, I think, of as we go into like the Tay scene is like she is struggling to get funds and use them for these secret activities without it coming across that, you know, she is going to be found out for being the one behind this. And so he is bringing in this, he says banker, but then she says basically like a thug who just happens to have a lot of money. So she's going to have to meet up with this basically, I guess, criminal to secure the money that is needed. I do find there to just be a little bit of a disconnect with this arc about like, okay, I get it that this is what this is about on Mon Mothma's side of things, is ultimately she's not getting through to enough people in the Senate. That's what the scene here got across. Otherwise, like, is it literally just about securing money? Which I don't think is like all that interesting, because like, what, it's been like 5 episodes or something like that we've been referencing the idea of Mon Mothma needs to get money, and now we're only just about getting around to like, and here's how she's actually going to get it. So the only thing I can really connect with this is, are they eventually going to get to a point where she just is full on in and realizes that like, yeah, I am a criminal to the Empire, I just have to keep it undercover, and she just kind of has to embrace that is what's going on. And because otherwise she seems a little bit hesitant about what's going on. She's doing her best. Now, she had that scene where she talked about what she's learned from Palpatine, which was really good, but is she willing to go kind of all in on this? And I suppose the meeting with this criminal to get this money is going to be a key point in all of this. But just in terms of a like season 1 arc, with 3 episodes to go, I'm not quite seeing exactly what they're going for. I like the depth that they're giving to Mon Mothma, but I would like a little bit of a better sense about what we're doing with all of these scenes as such, because I think a lot of people have pointed out that there's been a lot of focus on what seems more like kind of family drama with her, more so than necessarily the idea that she is a senator, in which we've only had like 1 or 2 scenes really highlighting that, and then otherwise it's about the money. And otherwise it's just, you know, the 2 kind of family members, of course, acknowledging, you know, sort of how far things have gone, to be careful, and she basically tells Val, just, you know, regain your sort of cover as the spoiled rich girl once again, and see where we go from here. Cool things down a bit, I guess. With the Deidre, I guess I'll focus on the Cyril stuff first. So with him, we find out that, okay, he was promoted, and basically the way they explain it, the way the episode goes, is that it's not that she directly sought out to get him a promotion, but like she said, like, they would get rid of his sort of criminal kind of history in exchange for helping them, which in turn led to him getting a promotion. So she like inadvertently helped him out, and because of that, he seems to have sort of like latched onto her of like, I really want to work with you to help you seek out justice for the Empire and all this sort of stuff. And like, it is this kind of weird character where like you don't really know what direction they're heading in, because he seems to be all about justice sort of like for the Empire, but he ultimately is driven by stuff that the Empire doesn't really care about. They don't care about the 2 people that were killed in the first episode, because they're not directly Empire people. They care about Andor because of the rebel connection, not because he killed people that Cyril worked with. And I think there's the slight disconnect that he's not quite getting, but otherwise he seems to very much be on the Empire side of things ultimately. And of course, like, the scene with Deidre is pretty creepy because he basically does reveal like he has been sort of stalking her, and like he wants to be on her side to help her out in a better way. In that, like, it's one of those things like, okay, he wants to thank her, but then it goes kind of much further than that. And I'm wondering, like, what are they building towards? Because the only impression I really got from like the rest of the episode with him was that, are they teasing the idea that he's gonna kill his mother? That's about the only thing I really took from the scene, was that he is growing increasingly frustrated at the way his mother is like kind of like talking to him, and that this is going to build to, I think, him snapping in some way. So is he going to become like a serial killer or something like that? Because it almost feels like that's the way they're heading down. Like he'll kill his mother, he'll be on the run doing whatever it is he wants, and it feels like he's going to come into contact with Deidre again, because that seems to be his plot up to now. So is he going to sort of get himself or her into trouble by trying to kind of meet up with her again? And if he is sort of like crazed after whatever he does, is he going to lead to the downfall of Deidre or something like that? I'm not really sure. Like, there's an interest obviously in that plot, but again, it's we're getting to the point now where, again, we've had quite a few scenes with this character, and I don't really know where they're going. And yes, I want to know, but that's more of a case of like, I don't think the show's presented enough information on the character, and I'm just like, show me the direction of where you're going with this character. The Deidre stuff, like I mentioned before, I found to be a little labored in this episode. Like, they took a lot of time to say not too much important stuff. The Bix scene, like, of course, you care about Bix, you don't want her to get tortured, and the reveal of what the torture kind of, the interrogation like device was here. It's not the one we know about, it's this different one that seems even more kind of crazy than you'd think. But again, it's a 7-minute build-up of like, she's not talking just to be like, hey, do the torture thing, and then they get all the information. And it's like, okay, fine, you didn't need that much time to accomplish that. And then after that, like, they do kind of skip around a little bit, where they're like, off screen, oh, we found out about this thing. And then off screen, oh, we've captured the rebel pilot, and here's what we're going to do. And they plan basically like an assassination of this guy to, I suppose, get closer into a specific rebel cell. About the main thing I took from a lot of what was talked about here is, of course, they are getting closer and closer to Andor. Andor is becoming more and more of a focus at these meetings, and we're getting the connection back to Aldhani, which is good. And the other point was that they are heavily monitoring Andor's mother. They're aware, like, oh, we don't need to act against her because she's like old and frail, but if he tries to contact her again, that's how we're going to get him, basically. So I think the setup is sort of there for, we're getting a prison break, obviously, at some point. Andor has to get out, we know that. So when he gets out, is he going to immediately try and contact his mother again, or what? A lot depends on what way they do Andor getting back in contact with the rebels, because otherwise, like, again, we still have the plot point where, like, Vel has basically been tasked with, like, getting rid of Andor, but she doesn't know he's in prison yet. So there's that whole thing. So I don't know. I still have a feeling that if they do go to, like, deal with Andor's mother, she's going to go out kind of taking down as many Imperials as she can. And obviously, if he finds out that the Imperials did that, that's going to really heavily push Andor to wanting to be on the rebel side of things, especially after his experience in the prison, which I guess I'll get to in a second. Is there anything left on the Deidre side of things that I really want to bring up? Things seem to be going very well for her so far, in that she was right. Obviously, she is the closest to finding out about the rebel cell activity, and she seems to have a lot of the other officers kind of on board with wanting to find out about this. So there's that whole thing. And again, she seems to be getting onto the right track. You're almost waiting to see what will be something that kind of puts her down a peg or two. And I'm wondering, like, is that going to be where, like, the kind of open thread of kind of Cyril actually works against her in some way, or what? We have to wait and see. As for the prison stuff, in general, like, I just thought it was just fantastic start to finish. The gradual, like, build of, like, stuff like, say, the old guy on their table and his failing health over the course of the episode, as you can see, and that, like, there's the hint of, like, memory problems, and then you see him gradually, like, slowing down, problems with his hands, and then it's ultimately revealed that he has this, like, massive stroke at, like, the kind of worst possible moment, and the only thing that the medics seem to have is pretty much just the ability to check what is wrong with the person, and then the equipment to, like, euthanize them, basically, if they won't recover from their illness. There doesn't seem to really be any sort of facility for, I suppose, anything beyond just sort of, like, minor injuries where they can just quickly, like, fix them up and get them back working again. So that's obviously a bit of a problem. But then you do see that Andor straight away, over the course of a lot of time has passed, obviously, is organizing information for an escape. They seem to be highlighting the idea of, like, when a new prisoner is brought in, that if they can stop the kind of lift halfway down, they can just use that as steps to get up to the top level. They seem to be noting a few things about what sort of conducts the shock from the guards and stuff like that, and they realize, like, oh, if there's not too many guards, we can maybe do this. And then one of the really nice things across this episode is, of course, he asks the leader of their room how many guards are on each level, and he refuses to say because he just wants to do his time and get out, and he's in this position as the leader of that room for a reason, in that he seems, you know, slightly more allied with the Empire than a lot of the other prisoners. And then you see, as the kind of rumors about what's going on at the prison begin to come out, his doubt begins to come to the surface. And so ending the episode with the question and then the answer, how many guards, less than 12 on each level, is like, that seems very doable. Because if they can get the entire room, that's like, what, 49, I guess 50 people, because it's like 49 and then plus him who's just kind of monitoring everything. That's like 50 people versus 12 guards. Now, there's a lot of other systems in place, of course, like the floor, the fact that the guards are the ones that have weapons and stuff like that. They can control the prison. But it's a pretty significant numerical advantage that I'm guessing, based on stuff from previous episodes, is probably even bigger than is maybe suggested here, because they're saying like less than 12 per floor. And then we had that scene in the previous episode, which seemed to suggest almost that the guards have to kind of like swap between roles a lot and switch floors a lot. So I think they're almost setting up the idea that, like, it's not that there's 12 per floor. It's that, well, there's 12 that cover these two floors type thing almost. So they could have the advantage if they can get like a lot of the prison organized for a breakout. And that's going to be the big question, I suppose, with this, is how large scale of a breakout is this going to be? Because it feels like it has to involve most of the floor. And obviously there's a few characters we're setting up. I think we're setting up for sure that probably Andor, probably the entirety of their table, and the leader guy are going to be the ones to break out. Andor seems to have one guy on one of the other tables who seems very interested in an escape. So that's interesting. And then he seems to be doing something in like the kind of like toilet facility where like he's taken off one of the panels and is trying to cut through one of the pipes. Now, I'm not sure if they're setting up the idea that is that like a power kind of thing, so he can like cut off the floor, electricity, or is that going to be something like he can do something with the water or food supply type thing? I'm not really sure, but there's a lot of little things set up over the course of this that are really well done. And then I did like a lot of the subtle stuff that they did about how when they're walking between the sort of like buildings and they're in the kind of corridors and they can see the other people on the other corridors and they're doing like the sign language to figure out what's going on. And then you have the power outage, which looking back on the episode seems to be like that was when they did full power to the floors to kill an entire level. They basically, there's all these rumors going around after this about something has happened on level 2. A lot of people are killed on level 2. And right at the end of the episode, you find out what happened. And it's a pretty big reveal because they did in the previous episode the whole reveal about how because of the new system for like public crimes or whatever, it's now like doubling the amount of time you spend in prison because of them. And this affects people who are already in prison serving a certain amount of time. So the amount of shifts that they have left, the number is implied to not really mean anything because it can just get added to when needed. But there are some people who are close to completing their amount left, and that the leader guy has like 217 left. And that's why he is so focused on no talk of escape or anything like that, because in his mind he's like, I've got like maybe a week or 2 left. The old guy in your team has a couple of days left. Just let him get out. And I was like, okay, that seems somewhat reasonable if you trust that the numbers actually like work the way they work. But then the reveal is that what happened on floor 2 was that someone got released from floor 4. They had served their time, but they got cycled back into the prison on level 2. And this seemed to be this kind of big like reveal type thing of, I guess, like this is sort of like the new way things are working in the prison or something like that, because it's meant to be, I suppose, like technically like a mistake, because like this can't be the normal way that kind of things work, because all anyone who does this has to say is that like, oh yeah, I've been here before, just in one of the other floors, and then this news breaks out. So this is this individual event that obviously has happened here, and immediately floor 2 is like, wait, what? When you're released, you just get put onto a different floor? Like basically the us working diligently to serve our time doesn't mean anything. And now there's not really anything said about like if there was a riot that happened because of this. I suppose theoretically the only reason they had to go to such extremes was for that to happen. I would actually like to know, like, did they just do it automatically, or was it that it caused a riot? And so they just killed everyone on level 2. Anyone with any knowledge about what was meant to happen. So this is obviously some sort of a, I guess, mistake that has happened in all of this. And instead of like, I guess the implication seems to be that when you're freed, you're still not actually freed. You are probably just put somewhere else. But this was just a mistake where they happened to put someone in a position where they could just say something and cause a lot of issues. And so this obviously is changing the view of a lot of people who know about this. People are very suspicious of what's going on. And I think there's at least a potential here for a large-scale breakout if they really kind of go for it here. But now that Andor has the leader guy on his side, he basically, I suppose, through that, they have control of the entire room if they want to. And because of that numbers advantage, they definitely have a chance to get out, because I think they've pointed out how disorganized things are, how in control they feel just because they have a few sort of like automated systems, that there are ways to get around them, and that like if they take like the fancy kind of shoes from the guards, they can walk around on the floor no problem. And because there are so few guards, that also helps things as well. Now, the big problem is going to be like, okay, that theoretically gets them out, but do they have a ship to escape? And, you know, how well organized can the prison be? How easy is it for them to call in, like, reinforcements? And other questions like that. So, the prison arc, I think, is playing out pretty well overall. It is interesting that it has meant like that Andor, it's funny to think about in the context of like they're discussing like, where is Andor, like we're trying to find him, we're doing all this research to connect all the dots about him, and they don't even realize that they have him in basically an Imperial facility already, just under a different name. And are they going to sort of catch onto this like right as the escape is happening, or only find out like after the fact? That I guess it will be reported what prisoners did escape, and they're going to look and realize that wait, what? We had Andor? He was on this planet, we arrested him for this, he was in prison for this, and he was in there for this long, and then he got out. And like, what's that going to do to the Empire? And again, I assume that would prompt them to be even harsher, even stricter going forward, as is what this show seems to be in general showing us, is the idea the Empire is tightening that fist, not realizing that more and more people are slipping through. Like, that's the whole point of all of this, is that they are turning people who wouldn't be rebels into rebels because they are pushing more than they need to. And that is interesting. That's part of Star Wars. They're showing it here, and I do like that. So Andor in general, I think, is in a pretty good place. Like, it's a good show, definitely. But again, I think they need to find a little bit of a balance between, you know, the slow build-up justifying itself for specific arcs, when I think some of these arcs could do with just being a little bit more straightforward. And again, it's finding that balance between not being super fast-paced, where like everyone's asking for a little bit more expansion, and then being needlessly slow, where everyone's asking a little bit, like, get to the show. So balance is something that needs to be found here. And again, learn lessons from this show, both for this show itself going forward, but then to help other shows as well. Like, that should be the takeaway from Andor. So yeah, they're my thoughts on the episode. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.